tell you. It's colder than Toronto. And one morning, Erev Tisha B'Av, the eve of the 9th of Av, where we commemorate the destruction of the temples, in August of 1944, we came back from work to the barracks. The barracks were surrounded by Ukrainian guards and German SS men with machine guns. The searchlights that were there already were all lit, and we were told to assemble, and the Jewish commander, who announced that Wachmeister Schulz was going to sit in front of his office in the window, and each one of us that in that camp, we must go and tell him our name. That's all. That's all she told us. So each one in turn, we would go up to the window, and I would say, my name is Pinchas Gutter, and I saw him make just a little note. And I walked away, and he did that to everybody. After that, we weren't told anything. We were told, we were given our usual ration, whatever it was, and we went to sleep, assuming that the next morning we'll go to work. When we woke up at dawn the next morning, the camp was still surrounded, and we were chased out of the barracks and told to turn up on the parade. And then the commander came, stood in front of us, and made the following announcement. The following announcement was that he's going to call out names. And those people whose names are going to be called out are going to go to the next camp by train. The reason why they were moving us is because we could hear the Russian guns already. The front was coming very near, so we were going to be resettled to the next factory, or so they told us. Didn't tell us where we were going, but we were going to be resettled to the next factory. But there aren't enough cattle cars for everybody, because there were 1,000 women in that camp, and I can't remember how many men. And those that names were not being called out, they are going to walk. They're going to go by foot. But it sounds logical enough. So we started calling out names. Called out my name, called out my friend's name, called my closest friend's name, called out others, called out, and we were told, like, you are on that, the parade is on this side, you are there, we had to assemble on the other side. All those people whose names were called out. Suddenly he called out a name of a woman who was the mother of the chief doctor of Skarżysko. A woman, she was a woman physician who had been on extremely good terms with our Wachmeister because she was an expert physician and looked after their children, and he always used to walk, like, almost talk to her, and they were on extremely good terms. So he called out mother's name, did not call out her name. She went up, pulled at his hand, and unfortunately she also pulled at his wrong hand because he had been wounded. He had one hand, he had one artificial hand. But that wasn't the point. And she said to him, Herr Wachmeister, I would like to go with my mother. You didn't call out my name. Why didn't you call out my name? I mean, I don't want to be separated from my mother. I've been with her now all these years in the camp together. Why won't you let me go with her? 9, you must just go away. And he tried to push her away, and she kept on pulling at him. And suddenly, Handke took out his gun, like you see at Schindler's List, and he shot her, and he shot the mother. And then suddenly, we all realized, we kind of looked around, that the people that names were called out were all people, either they were yellow, or they were thin, or they were wearing rags. They were going to be murdered. They were going to go take them to the forest and murder, because now this is a selection. We did not have selections in that camp before. People used to die, people used to be taken out of the hospital, but we did not have selection to be murdered. So we started running. We were not surrounded by guards at that time, we were just standing on our own. So we started running around the camp, tried to run away, to hide. I mean, you know, the camp was not that large like what you saw in Auschwitz, but it was still large, and people tried to find, you know, places to hide. I jumped into a chest where the dead bodies were, And I was a young child. I mean, you know, I was still, when I was in Skaržisko in 1944, I was 12 years old. And there I was lying in this chest with dead bodies, and I got so terribly frightened, so I jumped out of there and I looked for a place, and I ran to my barrack, and because the barracks were built on stilts, I did what an animal does. I burrowed myself underneath the barrack and tried to cover myself with gravel and so forth, so on, like, you know, some animals that go and make a burrow for themselves and hide. Then the Jewish police, Ukrainians, the guards, started looking for everybody surrounding them. They surrounded the people that were standing on the parade on this side. Then they were looking for all those that ran away. And Katz, the policeman, found me. He pulled me out and he said, look, there's no point in you hiding here, because eventually somebody's going to come pull you out. He's got so many names he's going to shoot. But at that time there was nobody kind of thought about going on trains. We knew exactly what was going to happen. He's got 500 or whatever names he's got, so he's going to choose people, but he's not going to call out names because nobody's going to admit to their name. So basically there's going to be another parade. Come, I'll try and help you to try and survive. And he did me this great kind of last favor, which was save my life. He took me to the policeman's barrack, took all my clothes, took off all the schmatters that I was wearing, you know, the paper that I had wrapped around on my feet, and he washed me, combed my hair, took lipstick from his wife that passed away and rubbed it into my cheeks, gave me complete new clothes, gave me high boots like the policeman wore, new trousers, a proper jacket, a shirt, that I should look healthy and I should look well. And he said, look, I don't know what's going to happen, but you've got to go out, and there's going to be a new parade, and with God's will, maybe you will survive. So soon enough, when they found everybody, they made a new parade, and by that time there was a very strong contingent of armed guards guarding everybody right around. And Wachmeister Schultz started from the first row and went from row to row, pulling out people, and he threw them to the other side where there was this contingent of Jewish police from the Jewish, you know, camp police and Ukrainian guards holding their hands together, and you were kind of pushed into a circle so you couldn't get away from them. He came, walked slowly, slowly. My best friend, Jakob, was standing next to me. He was wearing rags the way I wore just before Katz gave me these clothes. And he also had an impediment that he was born with a leg which was slightly shorter than the other one. His right leg was, and how he survived the previous elections in the death camp, because he also came from Majdanek, I don't know, but he did. And he worked very hard, and he was my closest friend. And he stood next to me. You can imagine the trepidation in people's hearts, because they knew that now this is a selection to be murdered.